Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Hey everybody, Wendy Sellers here at the HR Lady. Welcome back to HR Empowerment. We are here today, myself and JC. Hey JC, how you doing?
Wendy, I'm doing real good today. I'm looking forward to this discussion as well.
Yeah, me too. We have a storyteller on the line here today. We are here with Justin Dorsey, who is a strategic HR consultant, a storyteller, connector, and fractional HR professional. Hey Justin, how you doing?
Well, howdy from Texas. It is good to be here, and I look forward to sharing some stories, most of which are somewhat true, I think.
Well, in HR, we do like, the truth, but sometimes you have to make stories up to get people to believe information, right?
Wendy,
Go ahead, JC.
Unless you're at a Coldplay concert, but that's an interesting story for another time.
We're going to skip right over that comment because that actually put a lot of HR people into tailspins for sure. But before we jump into that story or similar stories, Justin, tell us just a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, certainly. I didn't know anything about HR as a kid. I don't think many kids do unless their parents work in it. I think as a kid, there's only like 5 professions that even exist that you're vaguely aware of, but I actually went to grad school for counseling. And while I was working in grad school, got an opportunity to join the HR department, which sounded a lot more fun than accounting that I was working on as a part-time job. And something about it really just clicked. And so I went ahead and abandoned the counseling path and went head first, maybe nose dive into HR. It depends on how you look at it. And haven't looked back since. I kind of refer to myself as a recovering corporate HR person. And now I'm working in the fractional space, supporting small businesses and nonprofits. Okay.
I think you and I are very much aligned. I am also a former corporate HR person and an HR consultant. And there's days even as an HR consultant, like you feel like if I could just get in there and dig in and roll up my sleeves, I can get this resolved. But then we're not teaching them anything. So, we have to kind of learn to step away. So tell me, from operations to strategy, the evolution of credible HR. Not all HR is credible, as JC alluded to already, with a very, popular in the news subject. Don't blame HR in that. Blame alcohol and emotions, but that's a different conversation. But you, Justin, emphasized that operational excellence, including handling payroll, benefits, compliance, and everyday HR employee relations needs, is foundational to HR credibility. How did mastering these operating essentials help you transition from a support role to a strategic HR advisor role?
It's a great question because coming into HR without any of that background, I had no idea how many things I could potentially be responsible for. I didn't realize that there were that many acronyms in the world. There were just so many things that it's like, where do I even begin? And so I'm fortunate in that my very first role was hands-on, and I got to process payroll. I got to enter new hires. I got to do a little bit of everything. And it became evident to me that no one was knocking on my door saying, hey, I needed some strategic HR advice. No one asked me that. And it was during the time period where HR was pursuing the seat at the table with the leadership team. And what I realized even at that age was that they don't care if I'm sitting at the table. If I can't deliver on expectations, I can't execute in the day-to-day. Like if you can't pay people correctly, then no one really cares about what you have to say on most things. And so I realized that to have credibility, I had to deliver in the small stuff, kind of the base of the pyramid, the HR pyramid as we call it. And then the other piece of that was I had to learn enough to speak intelligently to the roles of the other people at the table. I need to speak CIO and CEO. And if I couldn't deliver to that expectation, then my HR perspective really didn't matter that much.
It's so true, and thank you for bringing that up. And I love the fact that you're saying, you still need to, regardless of if you're trying to be a fractional HR, HR consultant, or the head cheese in the HR department of a company, you still need to know how to do things that the people that are on your team need to do. Of course, over time, our skills kind of, I don't want to say they dampen, but we're not doing them in a day to day and things might change, but at least you're still getting the gist of it. It used to drive me crazy when I was going into companies, either as a consultant or full-time HR, and I'm reporting to the CFO and they're trying to give me strategy for HR. I'm like, you don't know the first thing about this. So if you're not going to help me, I'm not going to help you. It's one hand watching the other. So it is super important to tell everybody that is here today. And if you are thinking, hey, I want to be fractional HR, I want to be an HR consultant, you still needed the boots on the ground expertise so that you could dig into your bag of stories and your bag of goods and say, all right, this happened to me before. Let me try this again. JC actually just messaged me a question. I'm going to throw this over to Justin. What the heck is fractional HR? What does that even mean?
Oh, gosh, I love you asked that question. I no longer even advertise what we do as HR consulting. HR consulting is a part of fractional HR, but it's not all of it. And so one of my favorite taglines is the future of HR is fractional, because there are so many HR teams that are strapped for support. There's an HR department of one. They are wearing every single hat possible. And they just don't have the internal resources to get job done from a training development standpoint, a handbook, compensation survey, whatever it may be. But the sweet spot for what I do is supporting the small, sometimes mid-sized businesses that do not have an HR person. The entrepreneur started that business never even thinking about HR. And as they get a little bit further along and start adding employees, they realize that they're bumping up against new regulations and new complications, and they just need help. And so for just sort of like the fractional marketer or the fractional CFO type position, we come in and supplement what they're doing. We are not necessarily a member of their team, but we're an advisor of their team. And so we're providing a great expertise at far less the expense of hiring somebody full time.
Thank you for that so much. It is so important, though. So for the folks that are listening, whether you hear the words HR consultant, which I still use, or you use fractional HR, it really is, hey, somebody's coming in to help you. But you do have to ask the questions of, are you just giving me advice, or are you going to actually help me with the day-to-day? And there's differences, too. And so make sure you ask about that, too. JC just tossed me. Actually, I'll give it to you, JC. What's that statistic from Gartner there?
79% of human resource leaders say that delivering operational excellence in core areas like payroll and compliance is critical to gaining the trust needed to influence strategic business decisions. Back to you.
I love it. Thank you. And Justin, you've spoken about the power of fractional HR in supporting growing businesses of any sizes. What are the strategic advantages of using this model, and how can businesses really leverage it effectively?
Well, you think about the difference between a team of consultants with a different skill set that can scale based on the needs of the business. That's what the Texas HR team delivers, and that's unique. And there's a lot of individual consultants out there doing a great job, but we have a team approach, which is a little bit unique. But then I think a lot of times the business owner themselves, they just don't know what they don't know. And so you can come alongside, help enlighten them, educate them, train, equip their people to handle the HR responsibilities because they're the real boots on the ground. We're a supplemental resource for them. So it's funny, I've heard many small business owners say, oh, I'm too small for HR. And I'm like, the best time to start working on HR is going to be before you need it,
Right.
So,
Yeah.
just looking at if they were to hire somebody, speaking of statistics, like straight out of school with an HR degree, you're paying them probably 60, 70,000 plus benefits, unemployment, so all the other stuff. You're at 90 to 100,000 so quickly. And I'll tell you, it's a lot less expensive to have a fractional HR person helping your group than 90 to 100,000.
Right. And then on top of that, I mean, you can get many, fractional HR people or something like that, so it's like somebody who is an actual tactical person, somebody that's a strategic, somebody that's worked in a 5,000 person company where you want to go, even though you're only a 12-person company now, for example. So there's so many benefits. I'm thrilled that society accepts it now, that it's like, okay, I cannot afford even a full-time accountant, payroll person, marketing person, whatever it is. And so we've turned into these, fractional HR services. I want to get a little bit deeper into, flexibility, for growth as well. JC has some statistics that he wanted to share.
72% of small and mid-sized businesses report improved HR effectiveness and cost efficiency after engaging fractional HR. And fractional HR provides cost savings, enhanced productivity, and greater flexibility overall, especially valuable during leadership gaps or strategic projects. And lastly, a fractional HR leader can slash HR overhead by 30 to 40% compared to a full-time hire. Back to you.
Thank you so much. It's so important for our listeners. Again, no matter what size company you are, we all need help. And I think we've noticed that and are more willing to ask for it after the pandemic. What are your thoughts on that, Justin? I know for me personally, being a consultant, oh my goodness, I definitely was not bored during the pandemic. And I think people just changed their mindset since then too. What was your experience?
Yeah, it was kind of one of those enlightening moments where you realize, not to be over dramatic, but you just realize that life is fragile and that you're mortal and that there are bigger things to be concerned about, And I think a lot of companies let go a bunch of people. It caused distrust in the workforce. And you look at that 2025, the job is a complete disaster, So I think people are looking for alternative ways to get paid and get employment, and it doesn't have to look like it's always looked. And so I think that's opened up opportunities for fractional support because companies have limited budgets, they're running lean, they're running those HR departments have won, God bless them, they just need help that they don't have internally. So yeah, that's definitely opened up a lot of opportunities for people like you and me to come in and add instant value, instant results for them. And I think what happens over time is that you may have a really heavy workload with that client up front, just low-hanging fruit, getting stuff in order. And then not necessarily maintenance mode, but it does get easier once you get the blocking and tackling and the day-to-day execution stuff squared away. Has that been your experience too?
Well, I think it depends on if the company's growing or not. As long as the company's paying for a consultant, again, whether it's a IT consultant, marketing, accounting, are they going to listen to it? But I have also found out that when we hire people from the external, they're not always listening to us, right? The company. So listening is so important. I was just dealing with somebody recently myself where it was like, okay, we're going to jam this idea down your head. And I'm like, I'm the paying client. You have to listen to me, to make sure that we get the mission and the vision that we're all looking for. I do want to go back real quick, though, because I think you mentioned it in one of the other answers previously is about fractional HR. What are your thoughts on having payroll as part of HR, whether it's fractional or in-house?
It wouldn't be my preference. I'll tell you that much.
I agree with you. I agree with you, and I'm glad you said that.
Have you ever met a happy payroll person?
I have met happy payroll people, but I could tell you as an HR person, math is not my forte. Accounting is not my forte, so like if I'm going to be so super detail oriented to the math and the numbers, then maybe I'm not a good HR person. So there's probably amazing people out there that can do both, but I do want our listeners to understand that payroll and HR in regular size companies, let's just say, 500 employees or more, they're separate. They work together, just like we work together with safety, just like we work together with marketing when we're looking for candidates and things like that. But payroll is not HR. And if you think that, our listeners, if you do think that payroll belongs in HR, you might want to QC yourself and check that. It can work, but most of us experts in human resource say, no, that's a totally different field.
I would agree. I don't think it's kind of a thankless job too. I mean, they're not getting a call from an employee saying, "Hey, you nailed it on my paycheck today. It was perfect." But
Yeah.
if something is wrong, and that's the funny thing, because you've probably done payroll too, like you get a call from an employee saying, "My paycheck's wrong. It's too low, blah, blah." I'm like, "Well, have you looked at your check stub?" "Well, no, it just seems too low."
It's this thing called taxes
Yeah.
and all the
Our
benefits too.
benefits just went into effect. Like there's maybe a reason for it that you might want to eliminate before calling me, but
But this is actually a good point to bring up, just to go sideways here a little bit, is just saying, okay, regardless if you're using a fractional HR, HR consultant, or in-house HR and payroll, is to giving your new hires or people that have been promoted into new roles, giving them a 411, and just so you know, yeah, you got a raise, but this is really what your paycheck's going to look like because of the benefits, the taxes, or whatever benefits you chose. I like to have those. When somebody's signing up for benefits, like those calculators where they can see, oh yeah, I want this benefits. Oh, I'm only going to get that take home yet. So a little food for advice there for our listeners is it really, even if you have amazing benefits, regardless of the cost, unless it's free, it's going to change the payroll of the employee, and they may not be fully expecting that. So make sure you understand that. Let's switch gears here a little bit, Justin, and talk about culture. Culture as a retention lever. You note that culture must be intentional and it must be shaped by leadership and employee feedback. And so that's three different things. Intention, which means a strategy and a plan. Leadership, which means we need to hire leaders or train people to be leaders, the leaders that we want according to our mission, vision, and values. And then, of course, employee feedback, which I find is often way too lax and not there. In your experience, how does deliberate cultural building tangibly affect employee engagement and then, of course, retention?
I mean, culture is one of those things that you hear about a lot, and you hear about it so much that you're afraid it could become a buzzword, because it's definitely not a buzzword. Just like self-care, mental health is not a buzzword. It's a real thing that people need to focus on. And outside of HR, I love gardening. I love working with my hands. I've got a bunch of chickens. Like, I love being outside working. And the number one thing that impacts the success of my garden is the soil. And I feel like that's how culture for an organization is. And the thing about soil is that it's not right for everybody. Like, I live in Texas. I cannot grow an avocado tree in my backyard no matter how much I want guacamole every day. It's just not going to happen. And so the other maybe somewhat controversial thing I want to say is that HR doesn't create culture.
Thank you.
We love to help support healthy culture, but I think we've all worked in jobs where the HR person is aware of what's behind the curtain and there's no wizard. And all of a sudden it's like, how am I going to make this work? So culture starts at the top. HR cultivates it just like they're creating soil. And then when you do that, you plant the right plants in the right soil and they're going to grow and be successful. And that's the way I look at it.
Right. Love that. Thank you very much for that. I think JC had some statistics he wanted to share with us about culture, actually, which I love my statistics.
Companies that actively manage their culture, they see 40% higher employee retention and 48% higher engagement compared to companies that don't. 83% of employees who rate their workplace culture as good or excellent, they're motivated. They're motivated to produce high-quality work compared to only 45% in poor cultures. And lastly, companies with strong cultures, they see 72% higher employee engagement and 40% lower turnover. And ultimately, at the end of the day, CHROs who do prioritize culture gardening, they regularly attend to the behaviors and rituals and norms, making sure that the employee base is all well and read in. They're 3.2 times more likely to report high employee engagement as well. Back to you.
I love that, the culture gardening. It's so important though. But you're right. Like Justin, what you said too is like HR is not responsible for this. We're responsible as every leader is and every manager is of keeping the culture moving in the right direction and then going, hey, I see something going wrong right here. We need to step in. But I do see all too often companies just blaming HR or another department on the culture of the organization. If it's one department, Justin, you could usually figure it out. Okay, it's probably the leadership of that department, right?
Mm-hmm.
If one department's going south or they have a
Oh yeah,
turnover,
it's
especially a
sales.
voluntary turnover.
It's sales
Yeah.
or operations, hands down. I'm kidding. There's the good old HR operations fight back in the sandbox.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not us, it's you. Finger pointing. That's going to help solve things, right?
Yeah, right.
But JC, thank you so much for sharing those statistics. I think one was from Gallup about the fact that companies that do actively manage their culture see, listen to this again, 40% higher employee retention, which means you're not paying for new ads and new time to, interview people and find the right person and negotiate while this whole time the work's not getting done. What are your thoughts on that, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, we all know it's less expensive to keep an employee than to go find a new one and find a replacement. And the funny thing is that culture is such a unique thing to an organization, and that if they don't actively manage it and work on it, it'll actively manage and work on itself. It'll create itself. It'll go viral, whatever that may be. And I've had intake meetings with prospects who rave about their culture. And if I happen to be on site, I kind of do the eyeball test, look around, kind of pick up the vibe of the building. Right. And it's like, I think there might be misalignment. And so I love to ask the question, if I'm talking to a business owner or a CEO, I'm like, how would you describe your culture? And then I just say, hey, how would your employees describe your culture? And it really causes them a little bit of discomfort because they're like, yeah, it may not be necessarily what we advertise on our career website or on our bulletin board. There may be a bit of a disconnect, and we need to figure out how to bridge that gap.
Yeah, and there's, in case you don't already know, which I'm sure many of our listeners do, there are so many websites that employees, former employees, or candidates can go to talk about your culture. And I assure you, most of them aren't willingly going there to say good things, right? They're not going to be like, hey, let me create an account and log onto this website to say this company that I interviewed with was amazing. Or they're usually going, oh my God, that was, I can't say the word, but it was a blank show, and don't go there, run. And people are intelligent and use social media, and they use these websites to say, hey, I just got selected and got asked to interview with this company. Let me go and do some research first. And so companies, whether you have HR or not, if you're not doing that research as well, pretending you're an employee, you're not doing yourself a service there, because you need to be fixing your marketing is really what it is. It's employee relations marketing, candidate and recruiting as well. Any thoughts on that, Justin, on those websites?
Yeah, it's funny how much trust we'll put in anonymous internet commenter, but I remember, if this dates me, I don't really care. I remember when Glassdoor came out, when it started, and I was working for a mid-sized company, and one of the members of the leadership team came into my office, just red-faced and angry, and had a printed out piece of paper, and it was someone's negative Glassdoor review of the company. And you'll probably appreciate this, because I looked at that, read through it, and I was like trying to keep my poker face, because I was like, I kind of agree with what they said. I mean, there is some truth. It may not all be truth, but there's some truth in there, in what they were sharing. It's not like they totally made it up. And so we were forever battling our own online reputation. And that's a tough thing to overcome, just like a lousy Amazon score, And so I think that there's power in sharing that information, and that employees who are mistreated are more likely to speak up than the ones that are happy. And I just think, right, you can't ever neglect your reputation if you're wanting to be an employer of choice.
Yeah, it really is. And that also goes to my suggestion is these folks, that you're listening, if you're going, oh, we have some people that complain on Glassdoor, one of the many websites. I mean, even if you have one person, it can destroy your credibility with customers, with paying customers. So then it affects your marketing and your sales scores as well. So super important. I would encourage everybody, if you haven't done an employee engagement survey anytime, in the past 12 months, please put that on your strategic HR to-do list ASAP. And I'm sure Justin can help you, or I can help you, or there's many other people that can help you. We're not here to sell, but we really are here to tell you, like, if we're not asking our employees, hey, what do you think about us? Then we're not going to be able to solve the issue there. Now, some engagement surveys, they go the wrong way, and we lead them into selecting the answer. So please make sure your engagement surveys are legit and that you get a legit source that helps you find out where are weak points and what do we do about that. Any thoughts on that, Justin?
Yeah, I love getting feedback, and I love handing people the microphone and giving them an opportunity to be heard.
Right.
If you're familiar with the book Traction and like the EOS system, there's one thing that they talk about in there that I've really always enjoyed. They have the L10 meeting, level 10 meeting format, which it's real awkward at first. If you've never tried it, it feels strange. But one thing that they do is when they get to a topic, because they do this thing called identify, discuss, and solve. And so you identify what the biggest problem is or biggest issue that needs to be solved. And you start with that one before you get to number two. You got to solve it as best as possible. But in the process of the discussion, what they do in the meeting is you take time, you go around the entire circle of everyone in the room, not people that are raising their hands or speaking up. Every person in the room gets the first comment, and then, well, they first ask questions or make a comment. And so that's literally handing everyone the microphone. And if they have no comment, they'll say no comment, but at least there's the opportunity.
Right.
I feel the same way about employee surveys. Just give your people a chance to speak, but don't do a survey if you're not willing to at least listen and make a few adjustments.
I say thank you. I say that all the time. I'm like, are you going to take action? Or are you going to listen? If they're like, yeah, I'm like, well, then I'm not even helping you do the survey. I'm not even the one that I'm not willing to take your money, because in the end, I'm going to get blamed for it. Right. And so it's super important to make sure that you do understand. And I would also encourage you to do the surveys, especially if it's your first one, and especially if you're coming out of a not so great culture, is do it as confidential as possible. Sure, try to figure out, what department they're in or something like that. But if it was a not great culture before, and you say, I'm going to need your name, they're going to be like, nope, peace out, no thank you, because they're going to think they're the next one out the door. So thank you for that. With that said, let's switch gears here a little bit, and we'll actually continue on this conversation about employee engagement and return on investment. I can't talk. Execution excellence is something that, is your watchword. HR can't be strategic without tangible follow through. So how does strong execution connect to improved employee engagement and, in the end, improved organizational performance?
Yeah, I mean, it still goes back to Lencioni's dysfunctions of a team. The foundation of that pyramid is going to be trust. And I think execution excellence breeds additional trust. And I also look at it to mix metaphors like running a relay race. I mean, you're going to get handed the baton. You got to take it the next lap. They can't do it for you, especially in a small business space where everybody is wearing a bunch of different hats. And obviously, I think if we've been in HR long enough, we know it's easier to lose trust than it is to gain it. And so, but the interesting thing about that is that I heard about a survey, a customer satisfaction survey that found, and I wish my man JC had this statistic because he's great at reading those to the group, that if you are buying service or you have an ongoing relationship with a provider and you are able to work successfully through an issue, troubleshoot, resolute, whatever it may be, that it actually can create a stronger bond in the long run than the companies you've never had an issue with.
Right. Right, because they say, you know what, I had an issue. They fixed it. They fixed it for me, not for the general public. They fixed it for me. And now I know that they actually care about me. And I think JC might actually have a statistic on this.
From PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC.com, 78% of customers who experienced and successfully resolved a service issue do report stronger bonds and brand loyalty than those who never had a problem. Back to you.
Yeah, there you go, Justin. And just
I'm
like
not making it up.
Yeah, no, again, that's why we share statistics, everybody, is because we want you to know that, yes, we are intelligent and highly sought after people, but we're not making this stuff up, which is also important. It goes back to connecting what we were just talking about, employee engagement surveys, is like when you just ask a CEO or whoever, how is your culture? And they go, oh, it's wonderful. Well, how about we ask the employees, and the results come back and say, well, not so wonderful. And then they go, oh, hopefully they go, oh, if they don't go, oh, run far in the other direction, or call Justin or I and we'll come in and try to get them to listen. But here's another statistic as well. Organizations with a strong HR execution are 2.4 times more likely to be high performing in both employee engagement and business outcomes. So again, it's about, okay, do we have a strategy? And how are we going to get that strategy through to the lowest level of the organization so everybody understands why we're here, why we're making a change? So many changes going on in business these days, and really listening to your employees. It really can just take one person to make a difference to turn your whole ship around. All right, I have one more question for you, Justin, and it's about just like leadership development and boosting engagement from the top. So we've been talking about employee engagement, and managers are employees, but I do want to focus a little bit more on manager engagement. Manager engagement has become so critical, and I find often under supported. We go, hey, you've been promoted to management, good luck. What role does like training and leadership development, especially for managers, play in enhancing workplace employee engagement and productivity?
Oh, the age-old question of the newly promoted manager or supervisor, and how do you set them up for success when they were making widgets and they were the best widget maker, and now they're going to supervise the making of widgets.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is a place where so many companies, they just fumble the ball at the goal line, and it's tough because if you've ever been that person, you know how helpless it could feel when all of a sudden you've been tasked with new responsibilities and you're just trying to figure out what your new job even consists of and what you're responsible for. And so I almost always, when I do an HR assessment with a client, am going to recommend a training gap analysis, because they're going to talk about, oh, we lost some tenured employees, we've got some new folks that were promoted into positions, and their team is struggling or they're struggling. Sometimes they've even asked to go back to not supervising people.
Yep. I just had this conversation this week with somebody saying, you know what, I do not want to do this role anymore. And then I had a conversation with another person that got offered a management position and said, I learned my lesson there. No, thank you. You could take that extra 5-10 grand. No, thank you.
I think what's really hard, and it's hard to teach self-awareness to humans in general. Sometimes it's really hard to teach it to managers, but I just try to help them realize that it's never going to be a one-size-fits-all approach, and that you have to adjust your managerial style to what the employee will receive. And I think if you can't read the room, you're going to struggle as a manager. And you said the L word, the listening word, earlier, because I think that's the part that gets easily missed too. It's just, management is a muscle, just like anything else. And if part of that muscle is not learning how to actively listen to your employees, then you're probably missing out on some key signs. Or if you're so buried, like there's a reason like when you're testing to see if somebody is exempt or non-exempt, and you say, how much of your time do you spend actually supervising throughout the day versus like doing the work, And they're like, it's 50-50. Well, I don't know if you're really a manager at that point, you're
Right.
a player coach. And so don't lose the employee's perspective, be able to read the room, and then really listen to what's being said and also to what's not being said.
Agreed.
Managers
JC?
who adapt their style to both employee and business needs. They drive 29% higher team performance and 25% greater employee satisfaction. Wendy, you had one as well.
Yeah, so we were talking about the fact that, managers are, well, I mentioned they're often not trained at all. They're just thrown into the wolves, and then we blame them. And there was a study done that said only 38% of organizations say their supervisors and leaders are adequately trained to meet current business needs and, of course, future needs. So it's super important, folks. If you got managers, I don't care if they're the most, charismatic person ever. They've had previous management training somewhere else. We need to train them for the skills that we need today for the organization that we're in today, even if it's just dusting it off because it's the most amazing person ever. So thank you so much for that, Justin. We have here, everybody, I will make sure Justin's LinkedIn contact is in the podcast notes, but Justin Dorsey from Texas HR team. Before we're wrapping up, are there, any resources you recommend for listeners, and how can people connect with you?
Well, I'd love to connect on LinkedIn. That's where I do most of my storytelling. And so that's most people have like a love-hate relationship with LinkedIn sometimes.
Yep.
There's a good aspect and a valuable one, but there's also sometimes a Facebooky aspect to it that gets a little bit annoying. But one thing that I would just encourage people, I've been on this kick for the last couple of years, is that, HR people cannot deal with from an empty cup. You can't give from what you don't already have invested in you. And so if you're not getting that at your place of business,
Right.
There are great networking groups. There's great HR leadership opportunities beyond your employment. Like, find a place that fills your cup, because you cannot deal from an empty cup.
Right. Yeah, that's excellent. Excellent advice. Well, thank you so much for all of this information today. And I hope this podcast session has been helpful and beneficial to our listeners. Take care, everyone, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for joining the HR Empowerment Podcast, brought to you by Aurora Training Advantage. We hope you've gained new insight and strategies to navigate the HR profession. We look forward to you joining us again on the HR Empowerment Podcast.